So I want to welcome PINA RIDENTE. She's a registered psychiatrist, psychotherapist, certified open dialogue practitioner, has a degree in trainers training, dialogical approaches in couple and family therapy from 2016 to 2018. And she has considerable experience working with people experiencing psychosis and their families using dialogical approaches. And she has worked for over 40 years in the community services of the mental health department of Trieste in Italy. So we are promoting person-centered and rights-based approaches to mental health. And PINA is currently teaching open dialogue in Italy, India, and Brazil. So we have the honor of having PINA. I am very, very excited with this conference. And thank you, PINA, so much for joining us.
And I was just thinking, you can, after the break, you'll be meeting some of the people from India, if for those who would like to join there. With PINA.
So,
thank you.
Thank you, PINA.
Thank you very much, Claudia, Olga, for first for organizing together with Silvia and Jaco this. Yes, it's very important to be able to meet, even if it's pity that we cannot be in presence. So hello to everyone. And it's my honor to be here with you all. I'm really glad to be here. Well, the topic that I would like to share with you, the reflection that I would like to share with you today concern the restraints, and specifically the mechanical restraints. I had a few days ago some doubts, thinking maybe it's a kind of old-fashioned topic. But during these 2-3 days, I noticed that were a few remind to the issue of the restraint. I remember in the first day, someone asked how we can use open dialogue when in the service, one of the first intervention is mechanical restraint. So unfortunately, this means that the restraint and mechanical restraint is still a relevant topic, and we really must to talk about. I've been reading a couple of months ago an article, a recent article. It was a French article that supported the idea of the therapeutic function of the mechanical restraint, and like an instrument of care for specific psychiatric diagnosis. So it means for me that there is a lot, still a lot to do on this very, very critical point, and a lot to talk, especially in this community. About this time that we have together, my idea is to use a PowerPoint to support me to share with you my thoughts, and about 30-35 minutes, and then would be nice to open up the conversation with all of you. But please feel free to interact even during the presentation, the PowerPoint. If you feel to interrupt me with some questions, it's okay for me. We can manage for sure this. So now I'm going to share the screen with you. Is it okay? Okay, good. So we know, of course, that coercion is still used everywhere, and some of these form of coercion, like the compulsory treatment, is authorized also by national laws. Even if we know that the coercion doesn't help the therapeutic bond, and people feel as something violent when they receive coercion. And sometimes there is an overlap between violence and coercion, or needs a bit of violence to act the coercion. Still, there are a lot of issues. As the last World report, WHO report says, only 21% of the countries are aligned with the human rights policies, and still 2/3 of the spending of the economical resources are invested in psychiatric hospital and not in mental health community-based services. So it means that there is still a lot to do in the world to make a more humanistic and democratic approach to the mental health issue. As I said, I would like to focus on the restraint and specifically on the mechanical restraint. Well, to me, this idea of the mechanical restraint is still something a bit symbolic, with all the device that the mechanical restraint includes, like the bar, the ropes, somewhere even the chain, the straight jacket is really, honestly, seems to me really something medieval that need to be contrasted in any case and with all our possibility. The other reason is that even if the mechanical restraint originates many adverse events, is not much talked about in the services. The professionals seems to have the tendency to minimize or even to deny because it's probably too challenging. But also the users, the people that receive the restraint, prefer to forget the experience. And so even if there are many interviews that is possible to use as example, but people really prefer not to talk about because it was too hurtful, too challenging, too difficult. But still, mechanical restraint is done everywhere, in every country, in different conditions, and studies say that about 10% of the intervention of the people that receive intervention in the services are about mechanical restraint. So it's a very huge amount of this kind of treatment that create big issue to people. There is not enough data collected because there is not a big attitude in the services to record all the restraint that are done, I mean in the world, and where they started to collect, they found that the restraints decreased. And there are some studies in Finland and Germany, and they show that after some change of some laws just about collecting data, this was enough to reduce the number. So it's not a big deal to collect data. And this is just enough to reduce. So it's very important, I think, to start to do this. As we said, originates many adverse events, physical, of course, till death, and it's not so rare that someone dies while he's tied up, but a lot underestimate of psychological and moral impacts and controversial effects for people. that denounce to have loss of self-esteem, broken spirit, traumatic, like living a traumatic reaction, loss of hope, but also a lot of anger. And of course, as we know, anger improves the agitation, and the agitation improves the restraint. So it's an incredible circle that need to be ended, stopped. So why is still the restraint used in the service? There are some reasons, but there are also some false justifications, like that reduce the use of drugs. And I collect some studies on all that I'm saying, just to support what I'm saying. And it's not true that reduce the use of drugs. Some study in Germany and England show that where is used a lot of restraint is used also a lot of drug. And so it's really crazy to use both, because you put together the collateral effects of both the treatment. The other one is that there is a staff shortage, and also this one is not really true, because there are English studies that show that services with the restrained and no-restrained has the same number of professionals, and so it's not the number the main point. The reduced dangerous situation, American studies that show that it's not true, even the opposite. And so the last is that restraint, as the article that I mentioned, is a therapeutic intervention, but I don't feel to say that it's a therapeutic intervention, because it does not improve the health of the person. Maybe stop some specific situation, some situation defined dangerous, but for sure people that are restrained doesn't feel better after the restraint. As Michelle mentioned yesterday, there is no evidence that's about the effectiveness of the coercion measure and mechanical restraint. But mechanical restraints lead to longer hospital stays and is an obstacle in between the relationship, the therapeutic relationship. And as the WHO report, the last one say, fear of coercion can stop people from seeking help. So could create really loss of therapeutic action, not the therapeutic action. So what happened in the current practice, what happened in the ground, why people go on using this restraint? I think much more because it's a kind of routine mode to deal with very difficult situations that are considered dangerous. And this modality that people think that is very difficult to abolish is closely linked to the culture of the service, the culture of the professionals, the organization, the orientation of the services. This that make the difference, not the number, not other things. And behind this culture, mostly of the time, there is still an asylum model of care. So prejudice against the mental illness, objectification of the person. You cannot tie a person if you don't somehow objectify this person. And much more important, still the idea of the dangerousness of the person with psychiatric issues. And this idea of people being dangerous because has a psychiatric issue is something really very difficult to cancel, and it's something that increases the stigma about the mental issue. The mechanical restraint does not create issue only to the people that receive it, but also to the professionals. because it's one of the cause of burnout, just because there is a lot of confusion, a cultural disorientation on this point. People that are trained to support client users find themselves in the condition to do something that in any case is very difficult, to really harm the person. There is also a lot of defensive medicine in the use of restraint to protect, especially the psychiatrist, to protect yourself from the risk that someone can, a lawyer can accuse you about the consequence of some action that happen in some acute situation. So there is a very important legal note around the mechanical restraint. This is a very difficult point because it's complex and ambiguous. This is ambiguous because there is not, I think, anywhere, a specific law, I mean a hard law, a very clear law that give authorization for mechanical restraint. But on the other side, there is not a specific law, hard law, that prohibits it. So all is into the so-called soft law, means some juridical instruments that change in every country, change according with the change of the scientific results, and are more directed to support the responsibility of the professional than to defend somehow the right of the person. So of course there is, every country has a constitution that speaks about the right to be free, and every country has a law against the kidnapping, but seems not to be enough somehow. This confusion, this ambiguity happened because there is a real issue in this situation, and is that sometimes there are, especially in acute situations, some situations that are really difficult to manage, difficult to deal with. And for this reason, there is the compulsory treatment, for example, with the difference that the compulsory treatment, as we said, is regulated generally by national law. And so, as a kind of regulation. So there are some situations very difficult where need somehow to stop the person to avoid big issues, big problems, like the compulsory treatment, the legitimate defense, the state of necessity. But these are just extreme situations, so a few situations that doesn't fit with the large number of restriction of restraints that happen everywhere in the world. So there is something else. This something else is the conflict between the personal freedom and the safety of the person that is receiving the treatment. Seems that the professionals in this conflict do what they think that is in the best interest for the person. But who decides which is my best interest? This is the point. It depends from who is on the other side. And so you can understand, we can understand that this reason is too arbitrary, too much related to the cultural characteristic of the professional. So we cannot rely, it's not safe to rely on this, too much arbitrarity on this. So the point, is mechanical restraint legal, remain a bit ambiguous everywhere. I'm not a jurist, so I cannot say, I cannot give an answer to this point, to this question, but I want to use the words of two jurists and constitutionalists, Italian, very clever and very into the topic. One is Maisto. He says, against the Constitution, no protocol is valid, no regulation is valid, no law is valid. And the other one, Piccione, he says, any form of psychological restraint, if carried out without validation by the judicial authority, is unconstitutional and therefore illegal. So it seems to me very clear words about the legality of the restraint, but probably not all the jurists, not all the lawyers agree with this point. There is there a contradiction, a conflict in which the professionals are involved, are entrapped in this conflict that is in between the duties of care and the duties of control. So the conflict between care and control, but when the control overwhelms the care. So needs a balance in between. It cannot be that the condition of the person is entirely absorbed by security requirements, but normally is what happens. And some restraint happen just for prevention, kind of prevention. For these are so many. So, as we said, is mostly a cultural issue in the services of the service. And so what need is to break the connection that is always linking the mental illness and the social danger. The prejudice that a person with mental problem issue is potentially always dangerous. So need a paradigm shift of the culture of the service from the social dangerousness to a culture of care. Taking consideration all the convention and documents, international documents that support and talk about the importance and the legality of self-determination, untouchable body. It seems that when someone is restrained, it's like you have in front of you a body that has no anymore any owner. It's a kind of empty body, and you can do what you think is better in your opinion. Not taking care of how ignoring the rights of the autonomy of the person affect a lot the therapeutic intervention. So just to move more on a practical field, this one was much more about, we can say, theoretical part of the issue. I can say from my experience that mechanical restraint is always evitable. I've been working more than 40 years in a service, and we are going to talk a bit about it, where are 50 years that is not restrained and open door service. So it's possible to do, and there are many other services where this is used and experimented. As we said, is the philosophy of the service that need to be changed, and is the organization of the service that need to be changed. And to change the organization of the service, you need to involve the manager of the service, need to be committed to this point, and also the policies, because it's important to move slowly to a law that block the restraint. A service that no restraint is a service that is able to listen people, to negotiate everything in every moment, that is flexible, that is trained in reducing the conflict, in reducing the contrast, the stress, the distress, and is able to respect the autonomy of the person, of the people, in any condition, putting this as first point of their intervention. Now we have many international documents that could be of great help to support this cause, and could be of great help for users, for people to support their human rights. For sure, the Convention of the Right of Persons with Disabilities, very important, fundamental document. You already mentioned it. That has many articles on this point, of course. But there are also many others. I just mentioned a few of the many others international documents that support the importance of respect, the human rights, the autonomy of the person, reaffirm the importance of overcoming restraint. Every nation has a national committees for bioethics that is in that direction. But around this topic, there is much more a kind of experiential knowledge, because all the documented, the national documents that are fundamentally important, but sometimes could be general, give some important principles, but doesn't change the law and the situation in the services. Could be a guide, a guideline. So we have to learn from the experience, from other situations where the mechanical restraint is abolished, is finished. And we have this document, was Michelle talking about it yesterday, so I just mentioned it, the guidance, the WHO quality rights instrument, that really mention all the experience in the world that are good practice, and also about coercion. And there are also others, like this Mental Health Europe, that made a kind of list of, in Europe, of services that are working very hard in the reduction and elimination of the mechanical restraint. Now, I want to just quickly share some about where I've been working 40 years, Trieste, that is in the northeast of Italy. And in Trieste, 40 years ago, the psychiatrist Franco Basaglia, he introduced the Italian reform and a law that closed the psychiatric hospital, but also the main point is that broke the link between dangerousness and illness and therapeutic attitude. So this was really important. When Basaglia arrived, he just, as his first action was, I don't sign the book, the document, to restrain, because it was in use 50 years ago, the restraint in the psychiatric hospital, and said, I just don't sign. That's all. So from 50 years ago, all the services need to manage a situation where the restraint was not allowed. 50 years are a long time, but for sure need to activate a set of community-based and recovery-based services, flexible, open to the rights of the people, with personal care plan, with personal budget, able to deal with the conflict, able to manage the contradiction, because you can quickly close the contradiction, just locking the door and type people, and you close the contradiction. But you have to keep open the contradiction and stay there with the people, respond to their needs and negotiate. Now the situation is not only in Trieste, but is regional. The whole region in 2016, fortunately we had a law that blocked the restriction in mental health, but also, and this is another issue, in the services for elder people, because it's a tragedy. Old people are really victim of this awful treatment. And in Italy, there is also now kind of association of all the no-restraint services, acute services in the general hospital that are pushing to have a national law about the restraint. This is one example. I want to share with you another example that is in the good example mentioned by the European organization, and that is in Switzerland. Just because I know this experience, Thomas Menegger started this, is a hospital, psychiatric hospital in Canton Ticino, 140 beds. He started in a different way. He said, presenting his work, he could not just cancel the practice, but he could reduce it. Just saying that starting the working with the more severe people in a way much more close and attentive. He said 1/3 of the people normally are the one that really need a lot of attention, only 1/3. And 1/3 of this 1/3 are the one that has very, very acute and need repetition of acute intervention, like seclusion, like restraint, this kind of seclusion. So at the end, the number of people where there is a repetition of compulsory treatment, seclusion, restraint, in proportion, a small amount. And so start with this, with a very strong personal plan, a very strong negotiation with them, allow to this experience to slowly reduce in 5 years, but still now, to abolish the restraint. So are two different ways to approach the problem, the issue, and arrive exactly to the same point. So we need to learn from the experience, from documents, from sharing the issue. And already Michelle spoke about these two courses of the quality rights that are very, very useful and very instructive, and step by step show how to do it. So are precious to go on it. I just picked 2 pages of it to connect to our community of open dialogue, because in this program is underlined the importance of the communication that should be respectful, attentive, positive, empathetic, patient, and underline the importance of active listening, just to show interest and respect for the person, to ask the person to say more, and to encourage the person to express emotions and feelings. I think these words are very familiar to this open dialogue community. And I'm sure that the principles of open dialogue and the 12 key indication are enough, more than enough to deal with the conflict, to approach the person in acute situation, and to avoid the restraint, to negotiate, to dialogue, to get a kind of connection that could allow to avoid, which is the lack. The lack is determination. Determination, intention, especially from the manager, deciding that this restraint needs to be stopped, in the respect of the human rights and in the respect of the people. I want just to conclude, leave you with a small story, a small example about three, maybe even more, because 3 years ago in a open dialogue course in presence was a father of a young guy with psychosis, and he asked, my son had an acute situation, and he went in the service, and there he was restrained. was an awful situation. And now I wonder, and I ask, what Open Dialogue think about it? Because as I know, Open Dialogue says that all treatments can be used together. So it means that also the restraint treatment, as is defined, is possible to use in Open Dialogue. So I think that this community, that as I know is the more sensitive to human rights community that I know in the field of mental health, it's time to give a clear answer to this question. I know that each one of us think that it's not possible to restrain, but I think need also a public answer, a very clear answer to this question. I have finished my presentation. And just I would like to share with you all some thoughts, what you think about your experience, your ideas.